Hello and welcome back to Fuel the Flames. I'm your host, Malorian, also known as Brian, and this is the channel, this is the series where we really want to take your hobby and move it to the next level. Now, we've done a lot of different videos so far. We've talked about finding your passion, we've talked about being a leader, we've talked about setting yourself up for success, but today is going to be a little bit different. Today, we are going to be talking about failure. Now, I'm sure as soon as I say failure, that just seems really bad, doesn't it? That seems like something where I don't want any of that, right? I'm not in this to fail. I want to do well. Now, again, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. That as I'm talking about this, we're talking about this is from any different hobby. So maybe whether you're talking about painting, building, playing, whatever it is, whatever is your hobby, the idea of failing at your hobby certainly seems like the wrong thing that you'd want to be doing. So is all I'm going to be talking about today is just don't fail and then move on from there? Well, absolutely not. Failure is actually extremely important, and we're going to be talking about why right away here. Now, before I do that, I want to touch on a little bit what we were talking about last time. Now, last time we were talking about setting yourself up for success. You were doing that by setting smart goals and really kind of pushing yourself, saying that I want to be obtaining this measurable goal by this time. Now, obviously, if you go and you obtain that goal, that's fantastic, right? You took whatever place you're at right now and you're now somewhere better. And maybe again, because we're talking about all these different hobbies, maybe your goal for that is I want to be fully building all these models for this entire army. I want to be painting all these models within this certain amount of time. Maybe I want to be painting them to this standard. Maybe I want to be learning how to play this game. Maybe it's I want to be getting X number of games in from this system. Maybe I want to be running a tournament. Maybe I want to win this tournament. Again, no matter what that hobby is, it's really good to be setting up those goals for success so you can then break them down and make sure you get there. But then that really then begs the question, what happens when you don't? What happens when you do fall short and you fail? Is that it? Is that the end of the road? Well, we tried to get motivated. We talked to Brian. We went to Fuel the Flames and I failed. Well, guess that's it. Push it aside. Absolutely not. That's the last thing we want you to do. Now, I think the very first thing that we want to say here as we get into failure is, again, I want to be saying that word as much as possible because I don't want this to be this doom and gloom word inside of your mind. I want it to be something that is just the regular part of your process, the regular thing of continual improvement, that in order to get to the best spot, there are going to be some failures along the way. So, for example, we had talked about how maybe your end goal for your thing might be, I want to be setting up this large scale tournament of this size for this many people, blah, 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 all these different details. You break it down into its parts. Well, again, you might just not be failing this entire thing. There's probably going to be little parts within it. And then that's where we get to the importance of failure, which is learning from failure, because it's really by analyzing those things, those failures, they can then correct it to make sure that you do better in the future. Let's go and take a very easy example and say that your goal was just to win this tournament, but you didn't. You failed. You lost X amount of games and you didn't win that tournament. Well, if you just walked away from that, you would not learn anything. You could go to your next tournament, probably make similar, maybe different mistakes, and that's it. That you're not really progressing yourself as a person or your hobby. If you were to analyze those failures, you could figure out what were the results, what were they caused by, and then what can you do to fix those root causes to make sure they don't happen again. So I think that's the big thing. We should first thing, make sure that you just take failure out as like this is a bad word. And then secondly, we're saying that you have to analyze them. Now, what is the best way to analyze these failures? Well, the very first thing you have to do is be able to be honest with yourself, to be able to say, this is where the failure was. And that might very start with just saying, hey, I didn't win these games because I made these mistakes. Or maybe I didn't involve these models in my list. Or maybe it's a different hobby, right? Maybe I failed in the way that I wanted to paint this model because, I didn't really think of the shading in this way and stuff like that, right? But if you're the type of person that says, no, I'm perfect, I didn't make any mistakes, we're not even going to get there. Now, once we've identified what were at least some of the things that were a cause that led to that failure, the next thing we have to do is think about, well, what is the root cause? What's really the main thing that led to this, right? So if I look at that game and I say, well, I lost because I didn't space properly, or I lost because I didn't really have any answers to high armor, or whatever it is, right? Well, that in itself is not the root cause, right? That's part of the cause, right? That's part of the cause of the failure, but getting down to it, just not having the right pieces in there is not the root cause. What I really mean by that is if we want to analyze that even further, you could be saying, well, the reason why I didn't have the right pieces in my list to deal with that high armor is because I didn't really assess it as a threat. Maybe go down even further and say, I did not go and stop and take the time to look at my list to make sure it could answer all the regular SKUs. Or maybe it's something where I didn't take the time to actually go and assess what was in the meta, seeing that this armor SKU was there, and then ensuring that we have an answer there to it. And you can understand then that when you look at that part, when you bring it down to what its root cause was, whereas before, if we just said something like, hey, we lost, all right, if you take the next step, okay, we lost because we didn't have these elements. Well, you could maybe just add in those elements, but you might just then run into a different issue later down the way. But then if you go down that route and say, well, I didn't see this because I didn't do the assessment. In the very beginning, I didn't do that assessment. I didn't identify these problems. And then that's why I wasn't able to actually account for them. Now, in the future, if we did that, obviously, what's the thing that we're going to do? We're going to account for it. Next time we have a tournament, we're going to make sure that, okay, let's stop and make sure that I can deal with all the SKUs. I'm going to go and take a look at the meta and see what are the different risks that I might be facing, make sure I have answers to those. And now, it's not just a thing where I'm answering the idea of, can I answer high armor? Anything else that's related to that root cause is now going to be answered as well. Let's go for a different example. Let's take a tournament, right? Let's take a tournament. Your hobby goal is that you're a person that loves to run things in the community. Your number one thing is not playing, it's actually putting on an event. So you go, you build up to this big event, and it wasn't really quite what you hoped it was. You're hoping for a number one, something that people are going to remembering for years, but it just wasn't there. And it just kind of fell below the standards. Again, if I just said that, it did not meet what I was hoping to do, that's it. That doesn't really get me anywhere to make sure I can improve for next time. Let's say I went a little bit further and I said, what were those points of failure? Well, the points of failure were that we couldn't open up the hotel in time, so we couldn't actually get to the hall to set things up. The food was late, and then the trophies, it turns out that they weren't really as good as people hoped. Well, that's great. That's now 3 things that we identified that we can try and improve in the future. But again, we haven't really got down to the root cause. So if we were to do that, well, the hall wasn't open up in time. Well, is it because there was a breakdown in the communication between ourselves and the actual venue? Is it because that maybe I didn't look into that and I didn't realize that, I had hoped that they could open the doors at 8, but it turns out that the staff that actually opens that place up, they didn't come in till 9, and I just didn't really ever look into that, right? Now that I've looked into that root cause, obviously my answer will be to do those things in the future. Same thing with the food. Okay, well, the food wasn't there in time. Again, was it something where I didn't communicate and have the time right? Is it something where I just didn't understand this is the time that the kitchen opens? Is it something where they told me this time based on if it was 5 meals, but then I asked for 50? If I go down to that, I can now answer that root cause and make sure it doesn't reoccur in the future. And maybe again, if I go down to that root cause, it's not just going to be a thing where, hey, by addressing this root cause, now my venue's open on time and the lunch is there on time. But it's actually more of a thing where, geez, now that I've addressed this and I've opened up these communications and I'm making sure that these details are clear and won't be an issue, this is actually now answering other things as well, right? Maybe they can bring up like, oh, just so you know, there was a spill over here, or there's not enough tables in this area, or something, right? Any other detail that's linked to one of that part of that core issue, that root cause that you now delved into. Even something like the trophy, because that one's a little bit different. People were disappointed in the trophy. Well, who was disappointed in the trophy? Was it the winners? Was it the other people coming to see? How were they disappointed? Were they wanting a bigger trophy? Were they wanting models instead? Were they wanting a cash reward? Were they wanting multiple different trophies broken up smaller so that there was something for the big winner, but then random draws for everybody else? Again, if you can dig down and figure out what those root causes were, you can then now improve this for next time. And I think another thing to talk about now while we're talking about this example of the tournament is that if you were to come away from that, TOs, everyone is their own worst critic. They're probably going to say to themselves like, well, I'd hoped to put on this perfect tournament, but nope, it was trash. Everybody's upset with me now. They're going to be so disappointed. I don't even know if I even want to run another tournament again because I don't want to, waste people's time and make them upset with me. But I bet you every single person that went to that event, or pretty much everyone, was like, you know what? I was going to be having to just like sit around and watch TV or just watch the kids or do work because whatever. I got to get away from this. I got to get away from the stresses of my life. And even though it wasn't the perfect tournament, I got to go play with my hobby and have a great time. It's again, part of these things we're talking about, that by really living and putting life into your hobby, you're helping the hobbies of others. And so if you realize that, wow, nobody was disappointed with me, really, nobody's angry at me, no one's going to key my car, right? As long as I didn't run a tournament where I'm literally like smashing people's models with a hammer, they probably all had fun. And really the only thing that's to address now is that we can make it more fun. We can take it to the next level. Even if you got to the end of that event and it turned out that everybody was happy, you put out maybe a thing out there and said like, hey, let me know if you have any negative feedback, and no negative feedback comes back. There is still ways you can improve. There's other things that even though people can complain about it, doesn't mean that you can't make it even better. Maybe they didn't get to say anything about something because they didn't even think it'd be involved. I mean, maybe the idea that you're going to be adding on a bar here, maybe the idea that you're going to add on this or this or this, go to 2 days, whatever it is, you can go bigger, you can go better, no matter from what point you're at. And really the only thing stopping you to getting from that point to there is from learning from your mistakes, seeing where you fell short, and then now taking the next step. And hopefully now you can see then that those failures aren't really failures. You're not branded anywhere. It's not on your record that you're going to be shamed forever. It's just, no, in your goal of continuous improvement, you got it to here, and next time you want to go to there. It doesn't really matter where this point is. You're just always hoping to improve, and everyone is going to really enjoy you for that. Again, I was really trying to sell this as the point of the tournament organizer because that's really easy to sell, but I mean, we can talk about anything else as well. Maybe it's painting. Maybe you go and you paint up this model and you're like, you know what? If you look at those eyes, I really messed up those eyes. The lighting there on the legs is horrible. In fact, if you look at the model from like this way underneath, you can tell like there's a spot there I just completely missed. Oh, this is awful. I bet you nobody else is thinking that, right? When people are looking at the model from across the table, they're like, yeah, that's a great looking model. And you know what? If instead of you just dwelling on that failure, you just kind of think like, well, how can I improve it? Well, this means that the next time they see your models, they're going like, wow, that's even better. Maybe they're now starting to ask you something like, that's looking great. It's actually way better than what you did last time. I'm not saying your last stuff was bad, but it's even better. What did you do? And now all of a sudden that hobby, it's flourishing. That flame is growing. Everything's getting better. So there you go. I really want to talk about learning from failure failure. Now after this, going in the future ones, we're going to start breaking into the actual hobbies and learning how these different hobbies, if you want to be jumping into them, what you can do to do that. But I really hope this introduction was helpful to you. The idea of finding out that your hobby is a passion of yours, making it that you want to be a hobby leader, finding success, and then also learning from the failures that are guaranteed to come along the way during your continual improvement path. So there you go. Thanks for watching. I'm always hoping for comments down below so we can continue this conversation. And anyway, we'll catch you later. Bye.